So excuse the poor light quality, but you can see it's dark outside, and that is because it's about 3:30 in the morning and I'm just in the final run-in on the Melbourne Cup. I will get up in the middle of the night to trade a horse race, but especially something like the Melbourne Cup. Please like and comment on this video. That will allow me to produce better quality videos and more of them. And if you're interested in learning from somebody that's been doing this for over 20 years, then subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon if you want notification of new videos as they're released. So this evening I will trade the US Masters. It will involve working into the night in order to be able to pull out a result from this market. But why would I do that? And last weekend I was trading the Melbourne Cup meeting, and that involved trading overnight, getting very little sleep, trading the UK, and then to make things worse, I traded the US markets as well, clocking an incredible number of hours without sleep. And this is something that I'll often do. I did it the weekend before as well. But why would I do that? What's the motivation for doing all of that? Well, I think the motivation now is very different from what I had many years ago. So to wind yourself back to when I first started, I was working in a decent job, but I'd always felt the need that I wanted to go out and do something for myself. And I'd worked hard for a number of years to familiarize myself with financial markets, start doing stuff on financial markets, and that was pretty much where I was going to go. I think that my path was set. Then along comes Betfair, sideswipes me, and I end up going off in a completely different direction altogether. Well, sort of different, because it is trading, just a little bit different from conventional trading. But also there was an underlying factor here in that when I read the book Beat the Dealer by Ed Thorpe, I just had this feeling at the back of my head that maybe, just maybe, I could discover something that nobody had discovered before, or do something a little bit special. And I'd sort of done that when I'd won the football pools. I used an optimal covering combination and a model to pick the matches to be able to win the football pools, which was pretty much, a decent task unto itself. But I didn't have the opportunity to replicate that endlessly. But when I discovered trading, I remember the light bulb moment that it happened, because I'd been arbing. Most people would do matched betting nowadays, which is arbing, but that's primarily what I was doing. I was just going to a bookmaker, backing at a high price, laying it off on the exchange. And then one morning I just woke up and put 2 orders on the exchange, and they both matched. And then suddenly I realized what I'd actually discovered, and that there was a huge opportunity potentially in front of me. The problem that I had was that the market volumes weren't particularly high then, but nonetheless, it worked. I was able to make this work, and what an opportunity. So my incentive to start with actually was sort of money oriented, because I had to earn as much as I possibly could before the opportunity vanished. Why was the opportunity going to vanish? Well, imagine you take yourself back to this era. You've got a betting exchange. You could put a back order on. You could put a lay order on. And you get opportunity to bet for, opportunity to bet against. But nobody anywhere had said, and you can trade it too. You can put both on there and make a bit of money regardless of what happens. And the moment at which I did that, I was sort of thinking that, well, maybe it's a loophole. Maybe I'm not supposed to be doing this at all. And as soon as I get caught, then my account will be shut. So my incentive to start with really was to do as much as possible, as quickly as possible. So I worked super hard to achieve that. But in around sort of 2004, people started talking about this thing called trading. Of course, it was instantly dismissed by the mainstream. But the fact is, it was true. Me and other people were actively trading the market. So as soon as other people talked about it, I talked about it, because I was thinking, well, actually, this sort of legitimizes it a bit more. And maybe if we can embed it as a function of the market, then maybe it won't be shut down. And in fact, when you look at that era, the ability to hedge your profit regardless of the outcome of the event is what bookmakers call cash out now. All of those early pioneers, all of those early traders on the exchanges created that opportunity for the betting industry. And oh my, how little they have been rewarded for that. But ultimately, that was where the genesis of that came from, and a lot of the other things that occurred as well around that time. But then, of course, talking about it publicly brought the other problem, which was, surely if you talk about it, loads of people are going to rush into the market and you'll lose your edge, or you could potentially be at a disadvantage because of the new number of participants within the market. So that was the next concern. But both those things motivated me to work really hard. Also, I had a wife and 3 children and a mortgage. So I had to make sure it was viable, and I was quitting a really well-paid job to do it. So I had to make it work. Ultimately, I had to make as much money as I could, as quickly as possible. And the idea would be that I would then use that money to do something else. But yeah, we were starting from scratch. The software didn't even exist at that particular moment in time. And we had to create the software and loads of other things. And I just sort of followed my nose from that point onwards, really. I had no grand objective. I had no figure in my head as to what I would deem to be successful. But certainly when we introduced the software, that created another reason to keep going as well, because I just couldn't live with myself if I was selling software or a service or anything that I wasn't actually doing myself. I know that that's not an issue for the betting industry as a whole, or any of those sort of related type of industries. But that's important to me. It is key that if you're going to buy into the concept, that you know that there is somebody doing it. And the fact that I'm still doing it now, that's part of the reason, is that it's important for me to show you that I'm still doing it, that it's viable, that other people can do it. And I've sort of reached the stage, all of these years later, where I have given chunks of my knowledge to my children. So they can do it now as well, if they choose to do so. But, there are deeper things going on within there as well, because, what motivates me to trade this evening on the Masters or to get up in the middle of the night, it can be quite a strain. The earliest I had to start on the Australian racing during the Melbourne Cup meeting was 11:45 p.m. UK time, but I did get a lay-in one morning when the first race wasn't until 1:40 in the morning, so I could get a bit of a lay-in until about 1:15, give myself enough time to get warmed up to start actively trading. But the thing that motivates me now is very different from what motivated me at the start. Like I said, I want to show that it can still be done. But it's been a sort of a constant voyage of discovery for me. I keep discovering new and interesting things. And I've always loved messing around on spreadsheets. I've always loved sports, and I've always loved trading. And the ability to do all of that and make a living from it is just a dream for me. And I sort of almost don't need motivation, but every morning I'm getting up and I'm sort of thinking, I was thinking this, when I was out for a walk yesterday, I wonder if we do this and we do that, and if we modify this and change that, what about, I think that this could be. So that's what, that's what fascinates me. It just turns out that your judgments and the things that you're doing in the market get measured by a P&L. But ultimately, that is not the motivation. That tells you if it's working, because if you get a load of losses, then you sort of think, well, that didn't work, did it? It's not objective. It is objective. It's not subjective was the word I was looking for. It's black and white. You know if something works because it's represented within the P&L. So most of my motivation for actively trading is to actually see if something is working, or to try and progress it to the next level, because I've discovered so many fascinating little things. I've taken some of those things, put them back into my life or back into financial markets. And really the first 10 years of what I was doing was quantifying stuff, modeling it, and trying to approach the market from that perspective. But I'd say the last 10 years have been looking deeper. So understanding the way the market works, who's in the market, the way that they work, how do they think, what's happening on the field of play, and merging all of those things together. So it's become a much bigger project for me. And I spend a lot more time on that sort of analysis and detail than I used to, because I've sort of become fascinated by it. It's just fortunate for me that a P&L is what you get at the end of it, to show that it is working. But I'll endlessly pursue stuff, and I'll have many, many failures because I've made some sort of assumption that's wrong. But yeah, you test that, you realize that it's not working, and then you pursue another path. And the culmination of that over a large number of years means that I've got loads of things that keep me very active now and keep me pushing forward and exploring new avenues. So if you look at what I did last weekend, I traded overnight on the Australian racing on the Melbourne Cup meeting. That went pretty well. It was certainly worth getting up and working right through the night on that. Then I would get some sleep the following morning, very little, typically at this time of year, and then actively trade the UK racing, and traded UK racing for a large number of years, but ultimately that went pretty well as well. And having traded the Breeders' Cup before, had some ideas on how I could actively trade it this year, especially since it was on the East Coast, so it was slightly earlier in the evening. And then I went on to actively trade that. But part of the reason for doing that, and for doing that marathon session, was simply because I'd done it before. I wanted to know if stuff that I'd done improved or decreased the outcome of the results. And when you look at how the results went, they went fine, but it wasn't my best Saturday in November, or it won't be my best Saturday in November. But nonetheless, you know, I can measure it against last year and see if I did better or worse, and progress things forward from there. And the interesting thing about those P&Ls is they're all manual trading. They're me sat here having control over what's going on. It doesn't include any of the automation. So the overall result will always be higher because of all of those other things that are running in the background. But sometimes, even with automation, you'll be there fiddling around with it to tweak and improve and refine stuff that you think is necessary from there. So yeah, my primary motivation nowadays is basically that continued progress. I'm really fascinated by the way that markets work. I think it's got application outside of that. And it's sort of, you know, some of the smaller stuff, it's inevitable that I'll probably hand over eventually. But the automation sort of cut in and is doing some of that now, which is quite bizarre. But ultimately, the P&L is the product of what you do, not the aim. It was when I first started, but it isn't now. And, you know, when I first started, I was thinking of doing financial markets, and therefore some of my early P&Ls are skewed towards that. But now I have a wide range of sports that I actively trade. And a key message for you here, outside of, you know, there needs to be a deeper desire, some driver that pushes you on, is that the market is absolutely huge now. I never had to worry about whether trading was viable or not, because it eventually became an industry standard thing through cash out. But also, when you look at new people coming into the market, what's happened is it's grown the market massively. The last time I looked at figures across all of the sports on Betfair, they were turning over about £60 billion. £60 billion is the size of the market. That's way bigger than I could have ever imagined. And it generates a whole range of different opportunities. Whatever your skill set or whatever you're good or bad at, there's probably somewhere for you in a market somewhere. Even if your strategy or the market that you're looking at is a niche of a niche, of a subset of a niche, you know, taking even a small number on 60 billion, and it turns into something fairly significant. So whatever your motivation or whatever you're trying to do, you know, it's important for me to show that it can still be done, but also to reflect some of the experience that I've gained over the years. And I think one of the key things that I've learned is it's that journey and that level of exploration that sort of gets me motivated and excited every day. And I think that if you bring some of that into what you're doing, you'll probably feel the same thing. But yeah, 20 years after I started, opportunity's still there. It's much bigger than it was before. And wherever you sit within that market, you'll probably be able to find a niche that is suitable for you. Anyhow, that's why I get up in the middle of the night to actively trade. You don't have to do the same thing, but I hope that that video has been useful for you. So what's the moral of this story? While some people dream of worthy accomplishments, others stay awake and do them.
That's what you need. If you want to be the best, and if you want to be the rest, dedication's what you need.